So winter time, the 1991 coupe's not gonna see much driving for about 3 to 4 months. And I pulled the valve covers off, made a video of that. So if you're ever wondering how to do that for a 1991 L98 Corvette, just do a Google search or a YouTube search, it should pop up. But one interesting thing that I learned about this car when I went to change the serpentine belt is that I couldn't get the belt over the bottom pulley because it interfered with a cross member. And after researching that a little bit, what I think is going on is that my motor mounts are just plain wore out. The car's 25 years old. So started trying to look around, trying to figure out how to take motor mounts off, and the factory service manual makes it sound pretty simple. However, when I got underneath the car, it does not look simple. And so I don't know how this video is going to turn out. I'm going to go down underneath the car, and that's kind of hard video to do. But I think at the end of the day, what I might need to do is take off the exhaust manifold. You can see it right here, and that might give me enough clearance. So I've been working on getting the left side motor mount out now for about an hour, and what I found was that it helped a whole bunch if I could take the exhaust manifold off the left side. And once you did that, then you can actually see the motor mount. It's right there, and there's a cap screw there and a cap screw there that I can get to. I've got it loosened up. There's also one on the bottom that you'll have to take out from underneath, and if you go clear down in here, I don't know if you can see it or not, but yeah, you probably can't. But anyway, there's one down underneath, and underneath the car also I took out this piece of brace. It's a frame brace there to kind of stiffen the frame. Get underneath the car, you'll see what I'm talking about right away. It came out pretty easy just for fasteners, removed that. So once that was done, then I took a bottle jack and put it underneath the oil pan along with a block of wood so I didn't hurt the oil pan. And I'm just about to the place where I can take out those final two cap screws and then see if I can pull the motor mount. Well, my goal all along here has been to get down to the motor mounts on this car, and I've got the driver's side done, and I'm going after the passenger side. And hard to see, but they're back down in that neighborhood there. And what I'm trying to do is get the exhaust manifold off. It's right here. It's loosened up, but I don't have enough room to get it out yet. So I've been doing a few things to try to make that happen. One is I've taken the air conditioning compressor off and wired it up out of the way, and then it became apparent that I also needed to get this bracket or brace for the air conditioning compressor off as well. And one nasty thing about that is there's a heater hose down here that runs through it, so I had to disconnect that. And the last thing that I've done is I've loosened up the fuel lines, and hopefully after I've done all that, I'll be able to pull that air conditioning bracket out of the way, and that'll allow the exhaust manifold to move forward and then come up out. So I'm going to turn off the camera and give that a try. Well, I'll tell you this, getting that air conditioning bracket off the car is no easy thing to do. So once it's out, I'm going to take a good look at it, make sure there's no cracks, and make sure it's a good part. One thing that just makes it so hard to do is there's studs in the engine block, and so it's got to move forward almost 2 inches before it'll come off the engine block. And then right here is a hole in the part that a heater hose runs through. So you've got to disconnect the heater hose. And of course, on a 25-year-old car, they're all stuck on there really good too. So I'm going to put a new set of heater hoses on it as well while I'm into it this deep. Part of the reason why is they're hard to get to. And so if you're this deep into it, you might as well just keep going and replace them as well. You see this one here's got a good bulge on it, so I was able to find a full set of heater hoses from a supply house, and I'm going to change every one on the car. Well, there's the passenger side, the right side exhaust manifold, and I can tell you it was a big struggle to get that thing off the car. To do it, I had to take the air conditioning compressor loose from the bracket. Eventually had to take the bracket off. To get that off, had to take a heater hose. It's going out of here now, but The heater hose ran through the bracket, as did these fuel lines. I had to loosen them up, get them out of the way, and then slide them over these studs on the engine block right there to get that bracket out of the way. Had to push this stainless steel exhaust tubing piece down out of the way, and I had to take the oil dipstick out of the way. And my goal doing all of that was to be able to get down here to this motor mount. It's right down here, if you can see where I'm pointing at or not, but there's a through bolt right there, and then there's 3 bolts, 2 on the top and 1 on the bottom that go into the block. So my goal for all of this was just to be able to get down to that right side motor mount. So I think I'm finally ready to start doing that. Should be pretty straightforward. Well, it's been quite a struggle, but I finally got the right side motor mount out on this 1991 Corvette L98 engine. And the motor mount used to be right down in here. So this is the frame or the engine cradle part, and then it bolted up to the engine block. So anyway, got it over here on the bench, and here's the old one and there's the new one. And when you start to turn them up on their sides with the new one here and the old one here, you can see quite a difference. Here the rubber's pretty well centered up in the frame of the new mount, and the bolt hole pretty nice and snug, pretty good fit. So here's the old one right here, and you can see this big gap here and how the rubber's shoved all the way up there. And that's somewhat to be expected, but maybe not to that degree. The rubber's even tight on the back side of the mount right here, as opposed to being well open on that side. And the bolt fits pretty loosely in this one. So I have an idea this is the original motor mount, well timed for it to be changed. One thing that I guess I'd like to point out while I'm talking is when I first bought this car about 5 years ago, I was crawling around underneath it. At that time I knew just enough to be dangerous, and this piece of tubing was there. It's aluminum tubing, and what it is, it's a piece of coolant tubing that connects the oil filter with the oil cooling line and a heater hose assembly as well. And I noticed this gash right here, and I don't know if you can see that or not, but yeah, you can see it pretty well there. Since this motor mount was in the process of deteriorating, this piece of tubing was shoved right down tight to the frame, and it had started to wear a hole. So at that time I put this little piece of heater hose for anti-chafe in there, and it got me by 5 years. But as long as I've got this thing apart now, I'll either get this Heliart or look online, maybe see if I can find a used piece of tubing for that. Anyway, it's been quite a struggle, but you can see I got stuff everywhere. Hope I can remember how to put it all back together. Parts there as well. So we've hit the bottom point on this one, and we're ready to start putting things back together. Well, it is 70 degrees in February in Iowa, and we are loving it. But anyway, the winter maintenance is done on the 1991 L98 coupe. And just to put a brief cap on the end of this video, I did a lot of things to this engine, and my goal was always to get down to the motor mounts. And they are down underneath the exhaust manifolds. Factory service manual says you can change motor mounts without removing those exhaust manifolds, but I found it to be actually, I think, easier. Along the way, I took the valve covers off up here, and they had 26 years of wear and tear on them. I decided to paint them black, more because I had black paint in stock rather than anything else. I mean, I used an automotive paint on it, so we'll see how well that holds up to the heat. It's been running already, and I can't see any damage to any of the heat. I still need to get an emblem right there. But anyway, so winter maintenance included valve covers, new gaskets, painting the valve covers, removing exhaust manifolds, putting them back on with new gaskets, remove and replace with new spark plugs, and remove and replace with new motor mounts. That made the engine sit about 3/8 of an inch higher than it used to. And this was all precipitated by my having difficulty with getting the serpentine belt off. There just wasn't enough room between the bottom of the crank pulley and the frame. So after I dug into it and figured it all out, it was motor mounts, and now it's in good shape.